Let's just jump right in to selling in Brooklyn. My name is Tina Fallon. I am a real estate agent with Realty Collective. Realty Collective has been around for 19 years. I've been there for 18 of them. Victoria Alexander started Realty Collective as an antidote to the typical real estate agency and to help defy stereotypes around what it is to be a realtor. And we're basically your coach, your therapist, your sounding board, and we are here to take you from soup to nuts all the way through the process of selling your home in New York City. We try to make it as unstressful as possible. There's no way to make it unstressful, but we try to take a lot of that stress out of the process. And one of the ways we do that is we introduce you very early to a really great real estate attorney who can help you get your sale started. And that is Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for joining tonight. And I'm going to piggyback on what Tina said. I'm here to be your attorney and obviously make sure everything gets done legally, but it's also part therapy, part reducing stress. The goal is leave it to the professionals, have a great team in place. And we do this every day. We know the challenges, we know the obstacles, and we're here to walk you through it. But at no point should you feel overwhelmed. You can always ask any questions and we will be happy to answer them and walk you through each step so that you don't feel overwhelmed at any point, but that you're excited for your sale. And we'll be here to make sure that happens quickly and successfully. So that, I guess, like a little bit more about myself, just so you have an idea, is that I do exclusively real estate, and it's important whatever attorney you pick does real estate in New York and not real estate in outside the city and not real estate somewhere else. You really want to put someone in your corner that knows the ins and outs of New York and specifically Brooklyn. If that's where you're selling, it's its own animal and its own beast, and that you want someone who does this day in and day out so that they're an expert for you. So with that being said, I think we can get started on what the process entails.
Yeah, that's great. It is, New York City itself is very idiosyncratic in terms of the process. But that said, there's always a way that we can tailor this so that it suits your needs. There's no one way to sell a home. You only have one home to sell. There can only be one buyer for it. And as a result, we work really hard to kind of make it work for you. But we're going to take you through the steps that pretty much everybody's going to have to go through at some point in their journey to sell the home. So first of all, you have to decide to sell. And for a lot of people right now, there is reasons not to sell. If you have a great rate on your mortgage, it can be really challenging to try to sell right now because you're going to end up doubling the cost of your money and you may not be able to double the size of your home as a result. So this market has been in a totally crazy state of flux since the beginning of the pandemic. And the good news for sellers is that even though interest rates are incredibly high, that low inventory is keeping prices high too. So if you do have to sell now for whatever reason, you need to trade up to a bigger space, you're leaving New York, which we wish you wouldn't, but if you do, then even though all of the buyers are having a hard time right now, it is still a good time for you to be a seller. Let's figure out whether or not it's time for you to sell. So one thing that we always have you look at is, have you held your property long enough to be able to sell at a profit? So we like to think of it as a break-even horizon. For most people in real estate, like if you hang onto it for about 5 years, you've probably covered the costs of both the purchase, the opportunity costs of purchasing, and the opportunity costs of selling. And Michelle's going to get into that a little bit for you as well. But it isn't just that the market has increased or that inflation has increased the value of your home. There are a lot of additional costs to take into consideration when you are deciding if now is the right time. So Michelle, can you talk us through a few of those closing costs?
Absolutely. As you're on here with Tina, who would be an agent for you. So one of the costs in selling your home is going to be obviously paying the agent. A typical rate is 6%, and that's for the brokers. It's split between the buyer's broker and the seller's broker, or if there's only one broker, then that's that. But the seller does pay that fee. So you need to factor that into coming off the top. There's also transfer taxes, and that's New York City and New York State. And there's a formula for it. For New York City, it's approximately 1.425%. And then for New York State, there's an additional calculation, a couple $1,000s more that's going to go to New York State. So people often forget that you're going to pay those transfer taxes as a seller. And that ends up being a significant chunk of money for any reasonable real estate in New York. And so you need to really consider that. those transfer taxes. There's also, if you live in a co-op, there's something called a flip tax, and even some condos have that. And does your building charge 1 or 2 or 3% of the purchase price as a flip tax? Again, that could be a significant sum of money. Those are the three big ones. There'll also be, if you have a mortgage, you're going to have to pay some payoff, some closing fees for that, especially if it's a co-op again. These stock and lease are being held at the lender, and they're going to have their local counsel bring the stock and lease to the closing, and you pay an attorney's fee, a separate attorney for that. And then of course you have your legal fee for your own attorney. So these costs do add up, and it's important for you to work out the numbers in advance rather than put the apartment on the market and spend your time staging it and taking pictures only to realize, oh, I forgot about taxes, and oh, I don't want to sell anymore because now I'm just going to break even. But at any point, if you want to reach out to Tina or myself or whoever's on your team, they can help you work up the numbers and see, so you can guess where you can price this to make enough of a profit to make this worth it for you for your next step, wherever that is you're going.
Yeah, we always say we're really interested in taking you from point A, which is where you are now, to point B, which is where you want to be. And yes, there's a transaction at some point along the way, but we're interested in knowing where you want to get to. And if selling your home isn't going to get you where you need to go, then we'll take a look at other options for you. Sometimes you have a home that you can rent out. In New York City, you can command pretty high rents for places. And even if you've held on, if it's a co-op, if you've held on to it long enough, you may be able to rent it for a while. So if selling isn't the right choice for you right now, we also like to work on what are the other solutions that we can offer that might get you to your point B. Maybe not immediately, maybe you get to point A and a half, and then eventually you get to point B. But if selling is not the right thing to do, we will help you try to hold on to your home so that, and then sell at a time that is more advantageous.
Absolutely.
So let's say you've decided you've held on to your home long enough, you've worked out all the closing costs, so you're going to make a certain amount of money, but not too much money when you sell, and you're ready to put it on the market. We are really deeply immersed in the market. We represent both buyers and sellers. We know what people are looking for, and that's really important intelligence for us to share with you as sellers. So what are people looking for right now? And is your home that you're selling that thing? So people are always interested in desirable amenities. They're looking for key locations. So Brownstone, Brooklyn, particularly certain neighborhoods where inventory is very tight, like Windsor Terrace. Windsor Terrace is now a kind of hotter market than Park Slope. Outrageous, but true. People are now working from home a bit more frequently, and so they need more space. So if you have a 2 bedrooms plus a little space for a home office, that's something people are looking for. Always interested in outdoor space. Some buyers are really looking for school performance, which is something that we can't speak to, but they may already have it in their minds. Parking is something that people are looking for. So if you have a home that is compromised in certain ways, but it's got a really great garden, you're going to be able to find a decent amount of buyers for that place. If you don't have a home that features any of these elements, don't worry. There's always a buyer for every property, as long as it's priced properly and marketed appropriately. Only need one buyer. And then once we have determined, so this is a really important piece, I'm looking in my notes, is turnkey properties. So one of the things that seems to have happened since I was a young person buying my first home is that buyers are really looking for homes that don't require them to do any work. They're really looking for things that are move-in ready. During the pandemic, there was a lot of fear around supply chain issues and the cost and timing involved in doing a renovation. A lot of folks have not had the experience of renovating a home, and a lot of first-time buyers are really looking for something that they don't have to touch. They can just bring their toothbrush and their furniture and move right in. So if you have something that needs a little work or needs a lot of work, it is a really different buyer who is looking for that. And we can help you position your home to reach those folks.
And just one side note as a seller to think about, if you have renovated your home, which is going to make it super marketable and wonderful, please make sure your permits were actually closed. A lot of times closings end up delayed because when we get the title report, once we are already in contract, we discover that there's still the electrician forgot to get it signed off, or just the plumber. And it's something as simple as them scheduling the inspection, but that ends up delaying things. To the extent that you had permits on a renovation job, amazing that you have a renovated place. Check with that. And if you don't know how, you can ask either one of us. Again, happy to check that, but it's great to get a head start on that before you put the apartment on the market, so we don't have any delays in closing.
Yeah, this is something I think we'll get into a little bit more later on, but making sure that you actually understand what's going on with your home before you put it on the market seems obvious, but there are so many things that you may think are non-issues that will come up in this process. And so we just did a deal where it turned out there was an open permit that the seller didn't know about. And it was not a problem to close it. It was an electrical permit, but the contractor had passed away. Luckily, the electrician was still around, but definitely don't wait to do especially if you're looking like maybe we're going to sell sometime in the future, reach out to somebody now and let's make sure that your property is in the right disposition to sell.
Agreed.
Yeah. And then let's talk about your plan for what you're going to do after you sell. So this piece is as important as getting your home ready as making sure that you're ready. So we want to make sure that you know where you're going. If you are selling and you plan to buy with the proceeds from your sale, chances are you will have to sell your home and move into a rental home so that you have that ready cash. But if you were hoping instead to be able to find a buyer for your place and then find something else to move into and do a seamless transition that is contingent on the closed sale of your home, there are times when that can work, but the market that we're in right now, we're finding that well, and Michelle can speak to this, is that attorneys do not want you staying in your home after you have closed.
Yeah.
And it's just not as easy as it used to be to do that kind of a contingent deal.
Yeah, both sides, but buyers and sellers are both in this. And buyers of the new place, they don't necessarily want the seller staying because they're in this. Think about how you're in the same position to move somewhere else. They're probably coming off a similar situation from wherever they're moving from. So it's hard to have these post-closing possessions where you get to stay, especially if you're looking for something long-term. If it's something like a day or two overlap, people are a little bit more amenable. But if you're looking like, oh, I want to sell, but then not close for another month, it's just not occurring quite as much. So you need a longer term plan. I've seen a lot of people put stuff in storage and then do an Airbnb for a few weeks, but you want to think about those considerations. And also wherever you're putting your offer in, they might not allow it to be contingent on the sale. So you want to think about, am I going to have enough cash to hold me over? Sometimes you could do a bridge loan. I know I personally did that when I purchased. The lender just lent me enough money to make the closing on my new place. And then I paid them right back once I sold my other place. But that's something you could speak to your lender, speak to the lender of wherever you're moving to if you're using a loan for your new place. But you want to think about a plan and have a long-term plan before you go into all this so that you're not stuck homeless and scrambling and having all your stuff in storage for 2 months.
Yeah, it's really important, especially if you're planning on staying in New York City and you're looking to buy something else. Inventory is so tight, and we're in the middle of a sale where I'm representing the buyer and the sellers have not yet found the place they're going to move. And I know that we all know that they're going to run the clock out on their contract. So they're going to go 30 days past the on or around closing date because they're just still hoping they might find something. As long as everybody knows that's what's happening, then we can all proceed accordingly. It's really important, I think, to be clear and honest about what your expectations and your needs are with everybody along the way. We will only disclose the parts that are appropriate for negotiating, but don't hide it from us. If there's something that you need, we need to know.
We can't help you and we can't structure this right unless we know what your end game is in all of this. If you know that you need to find another place, you need to tell us that so we can try to buy you as much time. So we're under a duty to you. So please share everything with your attorney and with your team so that you can get the best representation all around.
Right. And then that said, on the other hand, if you feel like I'm ready to go and I moved out and I need it to be sold in 30 days, that is a really different scenario from what a kind of standard amount of time on market is for a home in New York City. So if your timeline is, I need it sold yesterday, then we're maybe looking at a significantly reduced price to generate a cash buyer who can turn it around very quickly. That's not going to net you out the most money for your property. So the more time we have to sell, the better. And Michelle, what would you say is about the amount of time it takes to sell a home from the time it's listed until it closes? Let's say, and from accepted offer.
Yeah, I can't speak to how long it's listed. It depends how well you priced it and all that. But if you've done everything right and you get an offer in the first week or two, once you have an accepted offer, then it takes about a week or so to get into contract, ideally. Sometimes it could be 10 days, sometimes it could be 5 days, but let's say a week there. And with a condo, you can close about 60 days later because there's less of an approval process. You might need to wait for their lender to approve the loan, but once that happens, the building is pretty quick to approve. With a co-op, I'm seeing more 75 to 90 days because you need to get the loan approved before you can submit your co-op board package. Then the co-op board package is submitted and then they approve them, and then it still takes about 2 weeks to get on the closing calendar. So from a selling perspective, I would budget about 90 days from accepted offer for a co-op, whereas with a condo, you could eke it into about a 60-day window.
And one of the things that we are still seeing is that, as Michelle mentioned, condos go faster, but the underwriting takes longer now than it used to. So we're seeing, depending on the bank and how it's working, is that something's just taking a long time to get cleared to close. And we don't have a lot of control over that. It's really, that's on the banks. So those are all different factors that can sway your timeline. And we want to make sure that you are prepared for it to go either quickly or take a long time. We want to make sure we've got you covered.
Absolutely. We want to just have those conversations and set the right expectations from the start.
Yeah. And so who do you have those conversations with? This is time if you're selling, it's good time to assemble your team. Your team includes at this point, a real estate attorney is the most essential. I would say even more essential than a real estate broker at this time is to get a real estate attorney who is going to be able to work with you through this process. And I think it's really important to do that early, not wait until the last minute, because as Michelle was just mentioning, the chance to really go through the property documents, make sure there's no open permits, no violations, no liens on the property. That's something you really want to do early in the process. And a real estate attorney is the one person who you really need, even if you were to decide that you wanted to sell your home by yourself and do a for sale by owner, you're still going to need a real estate attorney in New York City to get that deal closed. So you definitely want to reach out to a real estate attorney. And we are including something in the chat, which has questions of what to ask a real estate attorney. I'm sure Michelle has her own ideas about what that should be. But if you are deciding to work with a broker, for example, I'm doing a deal right now where my clients are selling a home. They live in Virginia Beach and they're selling a home in Brooklyn. It absolutely makes sense for them to use a real estate agent, no matter what you hear. Sometimes you really need a real estate agent to sell a home. So what would you ask when you're interviewing a real estate agent? So you want to make sure that real estate agent is an expert. So an expert in what? So if you're in a condo building, if you probably want somebody who's an expert in your neighborhood. If you're in a co-op building, you might want somebody who's an expert in your building, particularly if your building is tricky. If you are selling a house, you want somebody who understands the market for your house, who understands the neighborhood. And you really want somebody, in our case, we're really narrow in our focus. When we are selling property, we're selling property in Brooklyn with very few exceptions. This is the borough that we work in. And we understand this market incredibly well. We operate on a very granular level with our clients to make sure that we're marketing and pricing things accurately. And in order to get the result that our sellers are looking for, you really want somebody who knows what they're doing. If you've got a friend and you're selling something in Brooklyn and you've got a friend on Staten Island who is really, they're probably not going to know what to do with your property. And even for me, if you're selling something in Gravesend, I'm going to refer you to somebody because I don't do state. It's a really different sort of microclimate over there. And I would refer you to somebody who knows what they're doing and can do it well. But Michelle, what do you think you want to ask from a real estate attorney?
What should they ask their attorney? First of all, ask their experience in the market as well. Everybody's got an uncle or a cousin outside of that lives in Westchester or that lives on Long Island. Please don't use that attorney. It just doesn't work out. So you want to ask what their experience is in the city. You want to ask their availability. You want to ask if they're going to be handling the file or if they're just going to be passing this off to somebody else. The first thing I always tell all my clients is you're hiring me, so you're going to get me. You're going to talk to me. You're going to be able to text me. You're going to be able to email me. You're going to be able to call me. So you want to know, do they focus on real estate? Some attorneys, they're litigators and they just do this on the side. They're in court all day and they can't answer you when something's going on and everybody needs an answer, but they're in court and they don't have their phone. Maybe not the best choice. You really want somebody who does residential real estate. It can be Brooklyn and Manhattan together. Those two markets are very similar from the attorney perspective, less nuanced than it is from the agent perspective. So somebody who really knows Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens can all do interchangeably most of the real estate. If it's a single family home, Something else you want to ask is if they've dealt with homes, because homes have their own sets of rules than buildings do. Co-ops and condos have some built-in checkpoints in it, but selling a single family home, whether it's a 1 or 4 family or multi-family home, you want to know if they've dealt with that, how they've dealt with the open permits, as we discussed. And I think we might get to this later, but there's a new law right now about the property disclosures. And sellers didn't used to have to disclose anything about their property, especially when it was a home. This only applies to homes, not co-ops and condos. You could just pay $500 and not tell anybody anything. So now you want to hire an attorney who's comfortable going through your disclosure with you and having you tell the truth. You have to fill out this form now and provide it to the buyers. And you want someone who's had some experience and that it's new that it's been required, but you want to be able to have someone you can have open conversations with about that as well.
Yeah, that's true. Wait, it's not required for co-ops and condos?
Co-ops and condos do not require just PDCA at all. There was never a $500 fee, nothing. It's only required in any sort of freestanding home, whether it's 1 to 4 family or it's 2 family, anything like that. And it used to be, as I said, sellers could just pay $500 and not fill out any disclosures about the place. Now they are required to fill it out, and I believe they're required to give it to the purchaser when they're giving out the other documents about the property. The buyers will still do probably their own inspection. I would recommend that, but you might want to go through the form. If you had some major leaks or some major issues, you probably want to go through it with your attorney and make sure that you're disclosing everything correctly. You don't want any liability for later for being untruthful. Now, we don't know the legal standard. You have to only give what you know. You don't have a duty to go investigate, but you do have to tell what you know. And if you're unsure of what you want to disclose, you want an attorney that feels comfortable having that conversation with you.
Yes, and I believe, if this is true, is that records with the contract. So you don't want to wait until the last minute to begin filling that form out. It's quite lengthy and thorough. And again, another reason to get in touch with an attorney early in the process, because you don't want your failure to fill out that form to be the reason your contract isn't signed.
Again, this law is pretty new, but from what I understand, even just from the few weeks it's been out there, it's a red flag if you don't have that document already available when people are coming to look at the place. Because what are you hiding? Why didn't you do it? Just as early as when they start staging the place and taking the pictures, you should get that form ready as well so that it can be handed out to clients up front so that it doesn't look like you're hiding anything.
Great. And I'll stop handing it out to co-op and condo sellers because
I've
been a little over indexing on the form.
Yeah, no, you don't need to do it co-ops and condos. So glad to clarify that. Yeah, breathe the sigh of relief for all of you co-op and condo sellers.
Yeah, okay. So you learn something new every day. So that is great. The other thing I think is really important, Michelle's mentioning this too, is that if you need to get a hold of somebody, who are you reaching and how are you reaching them? Find somebody who you feel comfortable with and whose communication style is effective for you. If you're a person who you just want to be able to text somebody and you don't want to have to pick up the phone and call them, you don't want to have to look in your email, just let them know in advance. And we have all kinds of different ways that we can interact with our clients. We have project management software that we can use. We have the good old email. Texting is always welcome, and you can call me anytime, but making sure that somebody is available in a way where you feel heard when you need to communicate, I think is really important.
I can say this as the attorney, I always tell my clients when I first meet them that I understand that you guys all work all day too, as the buyers or the sellers. The clients work all day, and so they don't often have time to talk to you during the day. So they would like a call in the evening, maybe not 10 o'clock at night, but 7, 8, 9 o'clock. None of that's unheard of. And I try to make myself available, and any attorney you choose and you choose should do that. Of course, there's going to be a night when they can't, but they need to be able to answer the phone on a Saturday if you have a question, or answer the phone on an evening, or set up a call with you after work hours. And I think it's in today's work climate, everybody's working all the time. We could discuss the benefits or not benefits of that in a different Zoom, but either way, I think you should find someone that's available for the time frames that you're available to communicate.
Great. So you've chosen your team, you've got a real estate agent, you have a real estate attorney, you've gone through your disclosure forms, you have investigated your paperwork, you don't have any outstanding liens or violations, you're ready to go. The next step is to really get your home ready to sell. So how are we going to find these buyers? One thing is that everybody is online, right? This is where everybody's search begins online. And speaking from a person who works for a small boutique agency, we're members of REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York. We're not members of the National Association of Realtors. New York has its own sort of quasi MLS. And even a small broker like me, we all have access to the same information. So when I put your listing up on the internet, it's going to go out to all of the other brokers. It's going to go out to all of the buyers. It's going to go out on Zillow. It's going to go out on all the systems. And we have some systems that we put things up on that nobody does, but we're putting it out there. We're going to put it out everywhere. And when it goes out, people are going to look at it immediately. The people who are looking for your home are going to look at it within 15 minutes, a half an hour of it going up. They've got their alerts set up, and what they're going to see is photographs of your home. And they're going to decide very quickly whether that is something that they are interested in. One of the ways that we do help our clients get really sticky properties that people are really going to be excited to see is that we do a lot of staging for our clients, right? So if your home is not quite picture ready, we're going to help you get it there, either through carefully editing and working with your own stuff, or actually fully staging an empty home, which is something that we're in the process of doing right now. And the idea behind our staging is that we want to tell a consistent story from the sidewalk all the way to the basement, to the roof. We want to make sure that we are marketing the home in a way that is real and authentic to the home, and we're going to show it in its best light. We want to tell a consistent story. So that means that sometimes we stage things in different ways. If we have a super modern home, we might stage it in one way. If there's something that is funky old place, we're going to do something different with it, because we know who the buyer is, and we're basically baiting the hook for the buyer. We want to get them hooked on this place. And one of the things that people do is they're like, I can't really bother with all that staging. I'm going to do virtual staging. And the problem with virtual staging is also really good nowadays. It used to look like so stupid. And now virtual staging actually looks pretty great. But the problem is it is virtual. And so if people are like, that place looks dope, and then they show up at your house and it doesn't look like the pictures, there's this kind of cognitive disconnect for buyers that can completely turn them off of the property.
They feel
And
tricked.
What's that?
They feel tricked.
They feel tricked. It's tricky. And even if it says virtual staging on it, they're going to fall in love with the pictures. And so you want to show them the home they fell in love with. You don't want to show them the picture of the home they fell in love with alongside the home as it actually is. So I think it's really important to give buyers an authentic real life experience when they show up, and to make sure that it is consistent with the story that the copy is telling, the story that the historical record of your home is telling, and the story that your home staging is telling. It is a pain to do it, but staging and styling and cleaning is all 100% worth it. It'll pay for itself. Okay, sorry, I get on my staging soapbox and I get completely knocked out. But if we've done all of that, we've done a good job, we are going to get offers, especially in the market that we're in right now. Because this is why we do this monthly, is what market are we in? Spring market in New York this year has taken off like a rocket. It's been amazing. The difference between last year and this year is really palpable. And there are a lot of very motivated buyers, in spite of the fact that interest rates are near the highest they have been. I think people are just tired of waiting. And springtime comes, although what is this weather? But springtime comes and people get excited to look at real estate. So the market is really, people are very excited to buy. If you have something that you're thinking of selling, I would say don't wait for interest rates to improve. If you can sell now, there are buyers out there. And so we're seeing a lot of multiple offer situations, and even on places that aren't perfect. So it's a good time to be selling. But when that happens, you're going to have to consider offers, right? So how do you go through this process? So instead of there just being this one buyer, you've got multiple offers coming in, and there is a price obviously associated with the offer. So the numbers are very tempting, but we also look at all the rest of the deal terms. So the price is just one element. Is it something where somebody's offering the highest price, but they're also financing 95% of the purchase? If you're selling in a co-op, that's probably not the right buyer for you. If you're selling a house, you might actually be able to pull it off. So we really sit down and go through every offer so that you will understand as a seller, not only what are the implications for me in terms of my net proceeds from the sale, but also, am I going to be able to do that? Crucially, get to point B. Is this somebody who can wait to close until August 1st because I really need to stay in the home until August 1st? Or are they going to need to take possession July 1st? Or is this somebody who is willing to overlook the fact that your HVAC system needs to be replaced sometime before the summer and you don't have the money to pay for it? So these are things that we want to take into consideration. Every offer is different. You only have the one home to sell. And we want to make sure that we're getting you not just the highest price, but also the buyer who is going to make it all the way through to the closing. And don't be like, the offers are going to come in hot and fast. And it doesn't mean you underpriced the home. It means that you have properly priced it for the market. All right, so we go through these offers, you evaluate them, and you quickly get back to your number one buyer. You don't let them wait too long to get back to them, and you get back to your backup offers as well. So we really go back to everybody. We try to be very polite and considerate of other people's needs. This is very stressful for them, just as it is stressful for you. And so we don't want anybody to feel like they're being manipulated. And so we get back to everybody, we say, you got it, you're back up, and then we're off to the races during the period of time between accepted offer and signed contract. One of the most stressful periods in your home sale. We've negotiated the deal terms. I write them into a deal sheet, a deal memo, a transaction memo, and I send it off to your attorney and to the buyer's attorney. And then it's over to Michelle for a little bit.
Okay, so from the seller side, the attorney is going to then, once we get the deal sheet, as Tina said, that's the green light from the attorneys to wake up and pay attention to the deal now. That's our green light to get started. So we get the deal memo, and if it's on the seller side, if I'm representing you as the seller, my job then is to put together the contract. And that's going to be the New York form contract, whether it's a co-op or a condo or a house, and then an additional rider with extra terms to protect you as the seller, such as making sure that the purchaser hasn't filed for bankruptcy or they haven't been denied by a co-op board, all sorts of different protections for you as the seller. We're going to put together that rider and send it all over with the contract to the buyer's attorney. The buyer's attorney, though, on the other side is the one who's going to take a little bit longer here. And this is why this is the stressful period. Not only are they going to look through the contract and mark it up and put together their own rider and send it back to us, they're also doing what's called due diligence. And the due diligence is them reviewing the building's financials, if we're talking about a building, the co-op or condo board minutes. They're going to look at the alterations agreement for the building, the sublet policy, the financials from the last few years, the offering plan. And the sooner they can look at all that and digest it and tell their buyer if this is a good purchase, the buyer can then move forward. But they can't get started on that without having all those documents ready. So back to the theme we had earlier, part of getting ready is getting Tina all of those documents in advance. The last 2 years financials and your offering plan with any amendments. And if you have the building application and the house rules, all of those documents, the fact, if we can have that all gathered early and ready, we can get it over to the buyer's attorney along with the contract, and they can do their magic on their due diligence and they can get back to us on the contract. The other part that they do in due diligence is sending off a questionnaire to the managing agents. And that's like a list of questions the buyer's attorney has. And the managing agents, even though they know the answers, take forever to answer the questions, usually 7 days, and we're screaming and yelling. And then on the last day, they fill it all out within an hour. But until the due diligence is done, the buyer is not going to sign the contract. So in that period, even though you've accepted their offer, and even though they're so excited you accepted their offer, there is no contract. We are not officially under contract. So from the seller side, we want to push them sign, but from the buyer side, they want to sign also. They don't want to lose the deal, but they need to do this process properly and they need to do their due diligence. So there's about a week waiting period in there where everything's up in the air. The good news is during that period, if a significantly better offer came in, you can consider it. It's not very nice to do so to the buyer, and I would like to be upfront with them and tell them why. But as the seller, you still can consider other offers while this is going on. But the buyers they know this too. They want to get into contracts so that this doesn't happen to them. But again, they can only move as fast as the due diligence goes. So as the seller's attorney, the most important thing is to get that contract over to them within a day or so that they can get back to you and have the contract finalized. And the minute their due diligence is done, they can sign the contract and send it over. And then you can countersign and we can make it official.
And if you don't have any of these documents, again, it's not a disaster if you're missing some of this. Like, we can usually find them. For co-ops, a lot of co-ops have that information online. You just have to pay to get them. For my clients, I'm going to pay in advance. I'm going to get all of those documents so that I have them ready to go. And then you can just reimburse me for that expense at closing. If you don't have it, it's not a disaster. But if you don't have if you don't have your current deed or your stock and lease, your attorney is probably going to be the person who can help you get that information. And it may take a few weeks to get it together. So that is something that we want to make sure nobody's going to give me your deed. So that's something that you want to work out with your attorney in advance.
Yeah, and just like you said, anything can be gotten, anything can be paid for. You know, if you don't have your stock and lease, if it's a co-op, the deed is easy. The deed we can get online. Actually, we will always look at the deed to make sure that the name on the contract is going to be the same as the deed. Same with the stock and lease. We can always get a copy from the managing agent, but the original must be surrendered at closing. So if you've lost it, there is a process for that. But again, you just need to tell the attorney and then we can start the process. If you have a mortgage on the property, though, you didn't lose it. The bank is holding that. So don't freak out. It does exist. The bank has that. So again, these are things that attorney will ask you for at the beginning, but we want to gather as much as you can in advance so that we don't have delays just on documents.
Agreed, because time really is the big deal killer, and the management company is going to eat up all of it. So we don't have any time, and we don't have any spare time. We really want to be able to go very quickly through everything. So one thing that will also happen prior to the contract signing, if the buyer requires it, is the inspection. So even if you get an offer from somebody that says, "Oh, it's not contingent on the inspection, we just want to do an inspection to see," because you're in that period of time prior to the contract signing, they can walk away if anything spooks them or if they just choose to. So an inspection, if they're going to do an inspection, it is a sort of an implied contingency, even if they say it's not contingent. Your attorney is often going to want you to do that inspection before they put an enormous amount of time and effort into their work, because if something comes up in the inspection that causes the person to walk, then all of that labor just evaporates. So if we try to get the inspection done as soon as possible, if somebody is asking for one. I also think it's always great to have somebody do an inspection. I don't try to discourage it from people. You're buying a home, you get an owner's manual for the home. Just because the home is old and the boiler is old and the roof is old doesn't mean that a home will fail its inspection. Like, as long as everything's holding together, it's fine. And for the most part, if there's an old boiler, we've already explained that to the buyers. They're not going to try to come back and renegotiate based on that. One of the things that can happen, however, in an inspection is that people can discover something that you don't know. So if there's an electrical circuit that you never use because it's in the guest room and it's not functioning, we may get new information about the home during the inspection. Almost all of those things can be addressed either through a repair that you do prior to closing, or a credit that you give to the buyer so that they can do the work themselves, or in some cases, a reduction in the purchase price of the home. Or sometimes you can just say, "Sorry, that's going to be your problem." So those are all different kinds of solutions, but it is just good to know that there may be an additional layer of negotiation that happens after the inspection.
If I could just jump in one more thing, as a seller, we were talking about what documents to prepare, but also knowing about your home, which we've talked about, permits are closed. Just so you understand the standard, what you need to deliver to a buyer, especially in today's market. You need to have all the electrical systems working, which means the light switches and the outlets. And again, that's exactly what Tina was saying. They might come with a phone charger and discover that 2 of the outlets don't work, so they might ask you to fix it. You can exclude it maybe in the contract, but that's the kind of, you need to deliver that. The appliances need to be in working order. That does not mean they need to be brand new, but it means that the oven, the burners need to turn on. It means that the fridge needs to actually get cold. It doesn't have to be beautiful and nice and super quiet, but it has to be in working order. So you're going to have that. And then the condition of your walls, you're going to be able to take pictures off and everything. And if it's little nail holes and things like that's okay. But if it's anything bigger than about a dime is the industry standard, you're going to need to spackle it. You don't need to paint, but just know that before you move out, like the last day when you take everything off the walls, you need to spackle anything that's bigger than a dime. That's coming up a lot with flat screen TVs that are on the wall. So either you're leaving the flat screen for them and they've agreed to that, or if you're taking it off, you're going to need to bring the wall back to a smooth condition. And then last but not least, a lot of buyers are going to ask that the windows open and close properly and that the doors in the apartment open and close properly. So if you know about something like that, you can get ahead of it and fix it before you even show the place, or they're going to find it at some point and you're going to end up fighting about it at closing. So the standard, I just want everyone to be prepared for what condition their place should be in so you don't have any arguments with the buyer at the last minute.
And one thing that I seem to forget to mention to people is that if you have your home, it's staged or it just looks great because it's all your stuff, you really don't start moving or packing until after the appraisal is done. After you have signed contracts, everything's good, it's ready to go, the bank is going to request an appraisal, and then the appraiser should come within the next sort of week to
Yeah.
2 weeks after the contract signing. It is really helpful if it looks like the pictures when the appraiser comes through. They will be assigning a value to your home. And if your home is just, you've taken everything off the wall and it's just, it looks crazy because you're about to move, it can in some ways impact the appraisal value. So if you can just wait to pack everything a couple of weeks. If you can't, just let me know and we'll work on that. But that's one piece of advice. And then additionally, you will have to have moved out prior to your closing. So not sure why this needs to be mentioned, but it is
I think it
true.
would be obvious, but I agree. It's a conversation that comes up a lot.
I have had it happen where, for various reasons, I had a property close where the move out was not complete at the time of the closing, and we managed to make it happen, and it was great. But there was a credit that we had to negotiate for some debris that needed to be removed. But luckily, everybody was on the same page about it. There was clear communication the whole time. But in order to avoid having to give somebody a credit at closing, then please, for the final walkthrough, all of the things that Michelle was just saying need to be done. And then the house needs to be broom swept is the sort of standard of cleanliness that the home needs to be in. So you don't need to do a deep cleaning prior to your closing. We do like to deliver homes in quite clean condition. So it's something that sometimes we will do for our sellers if they had to leave in a rush and there's just like a lot of gack around. That's something that we will, if you give us enough time to do it, we can take care of that for you. But that's it. It just needs to be broom swept. You don't need to get those spots out of the carpet. You don't need to refinish your floors. But everything does need to be working as it was in the as is
Say no
condition.
trash left behind either. You can't just, oh, I don't feel like, I don't really want those plants, I'm gonna leave those plants, or I don't really want those, I don't like those bookshelves, I'm gonna leave them, like that. You can't, that's a buyer's
Exactly.
problem.
Yeah, so this is we didn't go over this, but inclusions and exclusions. So what is implied in your sale agreement is that everything that is attached to a wall or a surface is going to convey with the home. So that means that your fitted kitchen cabinets, for example, your custom blinds, your light fixtures. If there's a light fixture that is a family heirloom chandelier that is your great uncle brought you from Murano and you're going to be taking it with you, let us know in advance and we will make sure that the buyers understand that before they make an offer on the home. And then if there's something that you plan on including, so this can sometimes be if you're selling a house, I've definitely had more than one seller who want to leave behind, say, their gas grill because they don't want to like schlep it through the house to get it out, or they're moving to an apartment, or they're moving across state lines. They don't want to have to worry about carrying propane. So if there is something that you plan on leaving behind that is not attached to a wall, we need to know that in advance as well.
Agreed. I think you summed it up. And just
Okay.
tack on to the light fixture. If you are taking your family heirloom, you need to replace it with what they call a builder's grade. So go to Home Depot, go on Amazon, whatever. Just find something that fits there that's $30. It doesn't matter. It just needs to turn on and work for the same function. So if it was a ceiling fan, replace it with a ceiling fan. If it's a light, replace it with a light, just so that the buyers don't move on the first day and have no way to turn lights on in that room.
Yeah.
That's all.
And try not to wait to the last day to do that, because if your electrician is sick and can't swap the light, then we don't want to have to delay the closing.
Fair enough.
All right, we've wrapped this up. It seems like it's moved fairly quickly, but if we've done all those things, if we were really careful in advance, if we did our homework, then we should be proceeding to the closing. So this is also where we hand it over to the attorneys.
Yes. So the closing, as you can imagine, is the closing. That's where we're changing money for the keys. As the sellers, you don't always have to attend. Plenty of sellers give their attorney power of attorney, or these days because of COVID, we figured out how to do a lot of remote things. I sometimes overnight a package to the sellers and they just sign the documents the day before and they just overnight it back. So we have it at the closing. So it doesn't always mean, if you're moving, especially if you're moving out of state, you don't have to fly back for the closing. You don't need to spend any extra money on all this as long as you've left the apartment in good condition. But at the closing, what's going to happen is that the seller is going to be getting funds from the buyer for whatever's left. When the buyer signed the contract, they gave a 10% deposit. That's the industry standard in New York. So that you're already going to have 10% of their money, but the other 90% is going to be coming from the buyer at closing, whether it's made up all from the buyer or partially from their bank and from the buyer, but they're going to be bringing all that money to closing. Now, you have closing costs, as we discussed when we started this process. You have transfer taxes and the broker fee. What I like to do is have those fees all paid out of the closing, out of the money the buyer's bringing. So the buyer will bring several checks, one to Tina's firm, one to the New York State, all one to the building if there's a flip tax, and then you'll get the rest of the money, all as the net proceeds of your sale, so that you don't have to write any checks yourself at closing. The goal is not to have you lay out money just to get money back. So we try to make this as easy as possible. The closing takes about an hour to an hour and a half for the documents. It's a little bit faster if there's no bank involved, less documents to sign. And most importantly, whether you're attending or not, somebody needs to come to the closing with the keys, because the buyer gets the property that day. I get this question from buyer side all the time. When do I get to move in? The keys are yours that day. You probably shouldn't schedule your move the same day, but they get the keys. It's no longer your place. So you need to be moved out by the day before the latest. And this is now their property, and they're going to hand over either a check or a wire, depending on if you're there in person or not. We arrange the funds in different ways. And then that's it. You can say goodbye to your place, but move on to bigger and better, whatever your next journey is.
And if we've done our job effectively, then that last part of the journey is just a celebration for you. You get a big like whopper of a check, and your closing costs were taken out prior to that. So the check really is your money. And if you are selling a primary residence that you have owned as an individual, then $250,000 of that profit is exempted from capital gains. If you are selling as a married couple, $500,000 of that is exempted from capital gains. So for a lot of people, that covers it. So your closing costs are really your effective. Most of your taxes will be paid at closing. If you do own capital gains, if you do owe capital gains, you will have to pay that when you file your taxes. So
one caveat there.
Oh yeah.
So if you are moving within the state of New York, if your next residence is, or if you are still a New York resident, you were selling a second home or anything of that sort, capital gains are collected when you file your tax returns like that. For the 2024, you would file in April 2025. But if you have moved out of state and or if you've always been out of state and now New York is not your primary residence, New York wants to make sure you're going to remember to file a New York tax return. So they actually take estimated capital gains at the closing table.
Oh, I didn't know that. See, I'm learning so much stuff.
Yeah, so that's called the IT 2663 or IT 2664, depending on if it's a condo, house, or a co-op. It's different forms, but New York will take that from you. But the exception is if the New York home that you just moved out of was your primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years. So if it was your primary home, but you just moved to, I don't know, New Jersey last month, you still won't have to give New York the estimated capital gains, because the New York home was your primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years. But if it was really like a second home, an apartment, an investment apartment, or you used to live there 10 years ago and then you moved out to New Jersey and now you're finally selling that apartment, if you're outside of New York, does want to make sure, so they take the capital gains at the closing table, and then you file a return. And if there was too much paid to New York, you get a refund. The IRS
who determines what that number is, what the estimated capital?
So you put in the price. There's a worksheet. You have your accountant help you.
Okay.
Use the current sales price and then the purchase price that you had from whenever that was, 5 years, 10 years ago. And then you can deduct improvements you did to the property, like any renovations or any bills you've actually paid to the building for maintenance, things like that. You can add up. There's a whole worksheet of things you can add up, and then you see whatever the gain is. And then it's like a formulaic number, like 0.0825% times the gain, and then you come up with the number for the estimated capital gains. So if anybody wants to work on those numbers in advance, again, I can easily give them the worksheet and they can have their attorney work on it with them. But again, that will only apply to you if you live out of state and if this was not your primary residence 2 out of the last 5 years.
And then just addressing this capital gains question again is, can you do a little bit, because we have 2 minutes, if you can share a little bit of what, in addition to those improvements that you've made, say your initial purchase closing costs or your costs of sale, are those also deducted from your
net? You can add that in. Yes, you can add in. So it's basically any cost you had related to the apartment. So if you remember your original purchase cost, you can certainly put that in, but you can put your sales costs right now too. So like any flip tax that you're paying. I don't know that you can put your attorney's fee, but you can pay anything that was paid to the building. In addition, I know the flip tax is often included. You can deduct those things as well. So to take away some of the gain, because you're not getting to keep that profit either. So
right. They don't. And the broker's commission is added to that.
Yes,
correct?
The broker's commission can be as well, because again, you're not getting to keep that profit. So it's really about what's going into your bank account, what you started with and what you ended, and how much money is in your bank account, and what you spent on the apartment through the years and in these different transactions. And so they're looking at really the gain on what money you got to keep.
And I think this is something where I've had sellers who've owned their homes for 30 years, and they're not really clear about what their capital gains exposure is going to be. And again, like some people will be afraid to sell because they're worried about capital gains. Again, it's a conversation that I think you want to have with your attorney, have with your financial advisor, your tax preparer, if they've been doing all of your depreciation over time. It's a good conversation to have in advance of selling so that you're not really surprised by all of that when your sale is done.
As your attorney, I have these conversations with clients all the time, but once they get complex or once they're really looking at the depreciation values, exactly like you said, your best bet person here is your accountant, because they know the IRS tax code and they're going to know the New York's tax code. I know what I know from real estate, but I have not intimately studied the whole world of tax codes. And so I always refer everybody to their accountant, just because that's who knows your finances and knows your ins and out. And so it's just best. You can fill it out yourself. There is no requirement that an accountant help you with the form, but I see no downside in having your accountant. The form is literally 2 pages and it will take them 15 minutes it's not going to cost you a large amount of their time, and you will get the right answer and save yourself some capital gains.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, like, just generally speaking, don't let fear of capital gains stop you from selling your home, especially if you're ready to start the next stage of your life. I think that your home should not be, it should be a haven. It shouldn't be an anchor.
100%.
All right. I think we're at just about 6 o'clock. So I didn't see any questions in the chat. If anybody has anything that they want to add now, I'm just so excited to be able to have this conversation with you, Michelle, because I've already learned, doing this for 18 years, I've already learned a lot. But I think things change in this field all the time. And it's changing a lot right now. There's a couple of legal settlements that are in the works that are going to trickle their way down to New York. We're already seeing changes in the way co-brokerage happens, which is something that if you're thinking about selling, is a conversation that I'm going to have in our first talk about how buyers agents are compensated, how they're compensated now, and how they're going to be compensated starting in July. These are things that are in a state of flux at the moment, and you as a seller have an enormous amount of flexibility, as you always have had, but I think you should be aware of your flexibility in terms of how you want to compensate your team and what you expect, what level of service you expect to receive in exchange for your costs. So those are things that people should be willing to talk about. There's no set commission rate that you need to pay, and there's no single way to have a broker handle this deal for you. Again, you can do it without a broker, can't do it without an attorney, but we're expendable. And part of I know. My job has always been, and one of the reasons I love working at Realty Collective is that we really earn it. We work very hard, and I don't feel comfortable unless I know that I'm adding more value to a deal than I'm extracting from it.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to do a deal without honestly having an agent in your corner. Maybe if you're selling to your next door neighbor and you know each other and you already both live in the building, there's a couple situations, but there's no downside in having the agent. They run around like crazy and get everything done for you. They work the hardest out of everybody, for sure.
As I always say, is you can change your own brake pads.
Yeah.
Like, do you have time for that?
Right.
It is a real job. It's a job that some people feel equipped to handle themselves. But if you already have a job, you might want to hire somebody to do this.
It's a full-time job times 2, because it's weekends and weekdays. So
it is, especially this time of year. It is
hardest working people in the business.
7 days a week, and we're always on call. But I love it. I have to say, I worked in a lot of fields before I started working in real estate. I've done a lot of things while I've been working in real estate, and I have never loved a job as much as I love what I do. I never wake up in the morning and think that what I do doesn't matter. It's a privilege to be with people during this empowering transition that they're going through in their lives. And I feel really honored to get to be part of people's lives as they go through this transaction. I love it. I love this work.
Well said. I'll wrap this up with saying the clients are what makes this worth it. Sometimes I find that the closing is even the most fun time, because that's often the first time you meet especially your attorney. You've worked with your agent this whole time. I often meet the clients for the first time at the closing, and it's what makes the job the best, getting to know people and on a personal level. And this is personal for everybody. If you're selling, it's so personal. You're saying goodbye to something you maybe loved or you raised your family. And if you're buying, you're so excited for your next chapter. So it really is important to surround yourself with people that have a good vibe around you and just all positive feelings in the room.
Exactly. Thanks for these positive feelings, Michelle.
Absolutely. It was good talking with you. Good
All
chatting
right.
with you as well. I'm glad. I hope we could teach you guys something tonight, and we're here for any questions. I know they'll send you some information of how to reach us, but even if you're not quite ready to sell, you just want to run some numbers, anything, either one of us would be a great resource and happy to chat with you just to help you out.
Yeah, especially if you're not quite ready to sell. Now's the time to be reaching out.
Absolutely. All right.
Okay.
Nice to meet everybody tonight, and hope to hear from some of you soon.
Yeah. Thanks,
Take
Michelle. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
guys. Take care.
Bye.